Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. And it's been like 4 years now, 4 years to the day, 4 years back. We started the webinars and we diligently continued. And it's like more than 40 webinars have happened till date. And it's really going strong, and our attendance has increased. Our people attending the webinar has increased, the interest levels have increased. And I'm so glad that we could give so much back to the industry, to the vertical, to the field that we are a part of. So today's webinar is something of a combination for various subjects with PCI DSS merchant levels, validations, and of course applicable SAQs. Now we have in part these webinars, this content in other webinars also. And if you are there and you've been there as a part of attending our webinars, so positively speaking, you can go to our YouTube channel. One sec, I'll just hold it over here. Just paste the channel subscription link. Sorry, the channel link, and you can always go there and you can look up our past webinars. It's very important that you do, because uh, for example, I'll tell you the webinar on SAQs, not webinar, there's been a small short video, 5 minutes, some video on just the webinars, just the SAQ part, and which are the different level SAQs and how do these work. So if you need more information on that, do look up. Okay, now just before the time just drags on like this, I have pasted our webinar as our YouTube link. Do click on it, and there is a ton of content over there, and you can go through it at your leisure. Now, the webinar objective, as you as has been already been communicated to you about briefly about PCI DSS and the compliance level for merchants and service providers, then what SAQ is good for you, and what is an ROC, AOC, and what does it mean to the overall spectrum of PCI DSS is something that we'll be covering today. And goes without saying that whatever your questions post it immediately, and I will answer it as much as possible. That is, and this is again the topics that will be covered. And of course, if you are a CISA or a CISSP or a CRISC or CISSP, whatever, even for if you're a QSA or something, if you attend this whole webinar, you can put it up as a part of a CPE, continued professional education points that you need to showcase to the certifying standard, to the certifying body. But again, you need to be there for the entire webinar, and that's the YouTube channel. It's already there in the chat box, and all the informative videos are there on PCI DSS, HIPAA, GDPR, SOC 1, SOC 2, and that's what we do. Oh man, one sec. Okay, so you can see the informative resources. Actually, the screen had frozen. So just to give you the past few webinars, past few screens. And of course, this is what we covered with regards to the webinar objective and the topics covered in the webinar. And of course, this is on the CPE points, informative resources. And since I said that 4 years has passed by, and these are the webinars that we have covered, and it's there on our YouTube channel. Do visit the link, and you can see there all these webinars are there. And from what I hear from our marketing team, uh, even our trainees who are there in the compliance department, that there is no other YouTube channel on the internet who has as much information on such a diverse range of topics as ours. So I really hope this helps, and of course everything is for free. So do visit and let us have your feedback. And if you think there are some topics that is left out, you can always punch us a line and we'll look into it. So you can see it's on and on and on. It's just webinars, information sharing, information sharing, information sharing. So it is there. So yeah, so last time we covered CPR and CCPA, which is uh, California Consumer Privacy Act. So it is there in California. So of course now New York also has come up with a Privacy Act. So we might cover that going ahead. And as we go along, do type your queries in the query box, and I'll answer as much as possible. In case, like typically that happens, there are too many queries. And in case there are too many queries, then I promise you that I will write back to you my answers. And this is what I truly believe. The quote is a philosopher. It's not the answer that enlightens, but the question. So keep the questions flowing. We are all here on a learning spree, so please do not hesitate. And if you don't want me to mention your name, I will not mention your company name. I'll keep it confidential. But do keep your questions coming. And this is me, the face to the voice. I hope you can. Many of you must be, would be knowing me also, and it's a pleasure to know you too. But this is me. I have my own company, Vista InfoSec. I'm myself a PCI, QPA, QSA. I'm a CSSP and CISA, C-Risk, many other things. And of course, I have more than 25 years experience. I've got my own company, Vista InfoSec. We are there in US. Okay, by the way, we just launched our new office in California. We have been there, that's on the West Coast. And so far, we've been there in New York on the East Coast. So we are now on the West Coast too, and we have a new country head in the US. So we're getting quite a few queries from the US, and that's where this is gonna help. Reaching out to the right people. And soon we'll be coming up in UK too. So all my friends who are joining in from UK, will soon be there with you. All right. In any case, we have executed projects in UK. So, and this is how we are since 2004. Just a brief about the company. And these are our services that we offer in compliance. All the standards which are there, advisory. We do certification. We are there on the VAPT side, and we have our own training system also. Don't worry, I'll not take a lot of time on this. I'm done. Then I'll move into the subject area. These are the certification services that we do: PCI DSS, PIN, SSF, SOC 1, SOC 2, GDPR. There are so many other things that is happening: NPCI audit, RUPE Bureau, SEBI audits. So we do that, and this is a partial listing of your clients that you work with across the world. Okay, and at the end of this webinar, there will be a short, like hardly it'll take you 120 seconds to fill it. That's the max. You can even fill it in 1 minute, 60 seconds that is. So do fill in the webinar feedback form, survey form, which will let us know how this thing helped you and whether you missed anything, and whether you have any webinar requests that we can consider for upcoming webinars. So do us a favor and fill it up as we move along. Okay, so jumping directly into the subject, a brief on the PCI history. So late 90s, Visa recognized a need to protect card data to prevent any sort of unauthorized usage and access. So by June 2001, Visa mandated rules to protect card data. Now, Visa being the market leader, everybody took up Visa's lead, and they came up with their own. MasterCard came up with the site data protection. American Express came up with the DSOP. Discover came up with its own standard. And the result was one company needed to do all these certifications. So once there are 4 programs, and then confusion ensued. Obviously, it is going to be madness with all these, compliance programs happening, and each one giving their own 4 cents on 2 cents on, compliance with their card, using the card. And it was so difficult for companies to manage. 4 sets of rules, 4 sets of guidelines, penalties, fines, uh, control requirements, and also that's where they came together and they formed a new thing. That's the PCI Council, right? So PCI Council, Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council, SSC, and these are the 5 major card brands came together for forming of the standard. Even JCB is there primarily, and they seen JCB, in case you're wondering, they are there primarily in California and other tertiary markets. They are there. The majority would be Mastercard and Visa, American Express also, but yeah, that's one. Okay, I really hope that you can hear me. In case you're not able to, my colleague is on standby, and they'll be more than happy to assist you and sort out whatever queries that might be there. I really hope you can hear me. I've got a very bad cold. Okay, so
Wow. So version 1.0 was published in 2005, 1.1 in 2006, 1.1, 1.2 in 2008, and we started as a company. Vista Infosec started with version 1.2 in 2008, and there is this huge company, BuildDesk, also known as India Ideas, and we had worked with them on PCI DSS, and now it is version 3.12, upcoming hopefully in this year end. By this year end would be version 4. And in case you are looking at what could be upcoming in version 4, you can go again back to our YouTube channel, and you can see that there is a webinar just on PCI DSS version 4. So you can look that up too. Okay, so that's the PCI history. So again, not a perfect solution, but it is something. So even though it consolidated all the requirements under one umbrella, there was still the issue of compliance tariffs, trade laws. There could be the um, there could be the issue with regards to penalties, fines, because that comes under federal laws. So it doesn't cover, PCI Council doesn't get into the penalties and fines. That is basically taken up by the various brands and the local federal authorities in itself. So unfortunately, God forbid, if you have a issue with card breach, it's very well possible that let's assume you got Visa and Mastercard got breached, then both will institute their own forensic investigation. Both will issue their own penalties and fines. That is not covered by the council. And by default, Visa rules are the most restrictive, and it is therefore used as a benchmark guideline. And these are the council members, as we saw. The PO, it's called as a participation organization. This is the beauty of PCI DSS in the sense that it's not just written by some set of people or individuals sitting behind an iron curtain somewhere and guessing what it could be, and mostly people who have retired types. That's not the case. PCI DSS, and we have been very fortunate enough to be working on a few standards with them. It is an extremely well balanced and well presented standard, and it is fully with industry support where people across the spectrum, uh, it could be QSA companies, audit companies, merchant service provider, all pitching in their experience, their feedback on the standards, and then PCI Council consolidates everything, looks at the validity of the feedbacks, and then the standard comes out. So it is a very well thought out strategy, and I really find the PCI Council people to be extremely professional in the way they handle. Okay, the layout and the jargon. I really need to do this quickly so that you understand what I'm going to talk about next. So, typically speaking, when you as a cardholder goes to a merchant for 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 making a purchase, uh, you present the card to the merchant. The merchant sends it to the acquirer. Means it could be that you have a HDFC card or an ICICI card or Bank of New York card or a Bank of America card or whatever, Bank of Montreal card or Wells Fargo, whatever be the case. So it could be that you have a Wells Fargo card, and when you go to a merchant, they have a POS machine of maybe a Bank of America. So in that case, Bank of America becomes the acquirer, but your issuer is Wells Fargo. So your card number goes to the acquirer, means whomsoever the POS machine belongs to or connected to. Now, even the acquirer doesn't know to whom the card belongs to or which bank it belongs to. So they send it to the payment brand network. It could be Visa or a Mastercard or an Amex or whatever. They then forward it to the right issuer. The issuer checks the card, checks the validity of the card and the amount and the outstanding, this, that, and all, and sends maybe an accept or a decline, approved or a decline note back to the acquirer and back to the merchant. So if it is approved, the merchant closes the sale and hands over the product or the service, and then the issuer, pays the acquirer, the acquirer pays the merchant, and then the issuer bills the card holder. So that's the overall, flow, by and large as such. So whenever a customer purchases goods, either as a card present or card not present, um, card, what do I mean by card not present? For example, you buy anything from Amazon. So that's a card not present. Means you don't have to present your card as long as you have the card details. But a card present would be when you go to fill fuel, or you go to Walmart and they ask you for your card for making a payment. So so that's how it is. And the merchant, the acquirer, are also called, also called as a merchant blank or an ISO, independent service organization, sometimes in case they're a payment gateway, or a brand, for example, an Amex or a Discover or a JCB can also be the acquirer. But Visa and MasterCard are never acquirers. They always co-brand their cards with some other bank. So that's what you have to remember, because you might be having a card directly of Amex, but you'll never have a card directly of Visa or MasterCard. Okay. Now there are different cycles over here. During the clearing phase, there is a clearing, authorization, and settlement. In the clearing, the acquirer sends the purchase information to the payment brand network. The payment brand network sends purchase information to the issuer, and then the issuer prepares data for the cardholder statement, and then the payment brand network provides complete reconciliation to the acquirer. So in short, the acquirer and the issuer exchange, purchase information so that the payments can be made from from the issuer to the acquirer. Okay. And during the settlement, again, we see that the acquirer pays the merchant. Now over here, the acquirer pays the merchant. Earlier we saw the issuer paying the acquirer. In settlement, the acquirer pays the merchant for the cardholder purchase. The issuer sends payment to the acquirer, and then we see that the issuer bills the cardholder data, bills the cardholder. So that is where the settlement comes into play. Comes into place. Yeah. So in the settlement, we see the acquirer pays merchant for cardholder purchase, and the issuer then bills the cardholder data. And in the previous one, as we have seen, that is in the clearing, the issuer and the acquirer exchange uh, purchase information. Now there is something called a service provider. Now service provider, just I think yesterday, day before, I was having a word with a partner on how to differentiate between a service provider and a merchant. So in other words, a merchant is somebody who actually completes a sale, means actually takes the card information, debits the card, and then closes a sale. That's a merchant. So a service provider is a business that is not a payment brand and directly involved in the processing, storage, or transmission of cardholder data on behalf of another entity. A service provider can be a merchant. Now, what do I mean by that? Uh, yeah. Now, whether it is an acquirer or a yes, I think. Yeah. So let's look at this thing. Whether there is a merchant, there is an issuer, or an acquirer, at each end there could be service providers. For example, at the merchant side, there could be they might be having some service provider who is providing the POS machine, who is setting up a payment gateway and facilitating the sale. At the issuer end, there could be service providers who could be who could be maybe doing the reconciliation, or maybe answering the phones for customer disputes. Same for the acquirer. There could be also service providers who are actually, say, printing the cards, dispatching the cards, generating the pin, doing the pin injection in the POS machines. So these are the service providers that are working in the back end, facilitating either a merchant or a issuer or an acquirer. So that's where it is. um, okay, so that's a service provider. Now, these are the PCI DSS drivers. As I said earlier, there is an advisory board, there is industry best practices, there is community meetings that happens across the globe, and there is ASV and QSAs who are there, all providing inputs to PCI DSS for the upgrading of the standards. And these are the PCI DSS compliance requirements. And these are the six requirements, six objectives, and 12 requirements. And PCI DSS across the board and across all these years, there could be a lot of control requirements which are there below these requirements, which keep changing and are edited from version to version. Of course, the PCI DSS objectives are also there. And these are the merchant levels that we get to see in PCI DSS. Now, there are merchant levels. Now, what do I mean by a merchant level? See, understand, what happens is that uh, it could be a small merchant who are dealing with a few thousand cards every month. And there could be big merchants. It could be like a Costco, it could be like a Walmart, it could be like a Star Bazaar types or an Amazon, and they are dealing with millions and billions of card transactions every year. So in that case, if all are expected to follow the same guidelines, it will get killing for the smaller merchants because they simply don't have the resources in place, don't have the background in place, uh, to be able to make a choice or to be able to do anything about it. And that's where they have a PCI DSS merchant levels. Now, as I said earlier, what do I mean by a merchant? Merchant dealing with card payments through any channel, whether at the point of sale or the phone or for e-commerce, are required to comply with the PCI DSS standard. And there are four levels of PCI compliance based on which businesses need to meet the necessary requirements to remain compliant. So now, as I said earlier, since all businesses are not at the same risk level, they have categorized as to based on the business levels as to what could be a merchant level and what you need to do on the basis of that. So there are four PCI DSS compliance levels that determines the merchant level. So let us quickly look into that. Now, levels of PCI DSS compliance is classified based on the annual number of credit or debit card transactions for a business process. And the classification levels are determined as given below. So if for a level 1, there is 6 million plus transactions per year. Level 2, 1 to 6 million transactions per year. Level 3, 20,000 to 1 million transactions per year. And level 4 would be less than 20,000 transactions per year. Now, I'll give you the practical perspective as well as the hands-on practical as well as the technical perspective. Now, this is technical in the sense that as per the book, this is what you are supposed to be doing. Level 1 or whether level 2 or a level 3. Now, okay, I've got a nice question. Okay, Rudolph, that's a nice name. All right, so he's asking what is, sorry, I'm just having a pretty bad cold. Um, for these transactions are per brand or across all brands. So when you're talking about 6 million transactions, in short, that's what he's asking. Is it combined of Visa, MasterCard, Amex, or is it only for a particular brand? Am I right? So that's a very good question now. So this number of transactions per year is as per a particular brand. Okay, it is not as per a total scenario across all brands. It is for each brand. So there is a you know level 1 Visa, level 2 Mastercard, level 1 Amex. You can be like that also as a combination thereof. But as we saw earlier, Visa is the most restrictive, so that is taken typically as the benchmark. So this is what it means with regards to level 1, 2, 3, 4. So level 1, as we saw earlier, process more than 6 million credit or debit card transactions annually. And it also applies to merchants who suffered a data breach that result in a compromise or who have been identified as level 1 by the card issuer. Now, what I mean by that? Okay, so what do I mean by that? So, uh, it is not only the number of card transactions. Okay, so if an X company was earlier a level 4 because they were doing very less number of transactions, but there was a breach. So in that case, by default, they'll become a level 1 next year because they're a high risk now. Secondly, is that if this identification of level 1, 2, 3, 4, we always say to all our clients, this is a practical level. Don't go by just the number of transactions per year. Ask your acquirer and issuer. Rather, better ask just the acquirer because the risk falls with him. What happens is that if you are, like it could be maybe a Bank of America or a Citibank, and they might say that, okay, you are a small merchant, but what you're doing is high risk for us. And if you want to connect to our network as a merchant to our acquisition system, acquirer system, we can allow you only if you are assessed as a level one. And we have seen such cases where companies have not even done a few hundred transactions, but they are asked by the acquirer to do a level one assessment simply because the threat perception was high. So again, I'm saying that ask your acquirer or ask the brand, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, that what do they want you to do. So if you're a level one, by default, you have to do an ROC, annual ROC, and by a QSA. And there has to be quarterly network scans, or also called as an ASV scan, and required submission of the final AOC form. You need to submit the AOC to your merchants, to your acquirer, or to your key clients. Or again, it is for a level two merchant. It is minimum anywhere from 1 to 6 million debit card and credit card transactions annually. And look at the difference: 50,000 to 2 million sales using Amex and fewer than 1 million JCB international card transactions. So the point is that as per the brand, this transaction numbering changes. So here they say that in case you're a level 2 or a level 3 or a level 4, they ask you at a minimum to complete something called as an SAQ, self-assessment questionnaire. And there is a quarterly network scan conducted by an ASV, approved scanning vendor. So, so best is that, as I said, always ask the acquirer as to what they want you to do. It could be that you are technically, as per the numbers, you're there as a level 4, but he might say, no, no, I want you to do a level 2. So always ask your acquirer, or he might say, in case you're unlucky, he might say, no, do a level 1. But you might say, no, I have only 20 people in the team, and they would say, I don't care. You just get assessed because we can't take your risk. Now, that was for merchants. Now, for service providers. So, for service providers, again, they too are required to comply with PCI DSS requirements. Okay, there is a nice question that has come. Is level 4 also called as SAQD? No, no, it is not the same. Level 4 is not an SAQD. SAQ, there are different types of SAQ as we'll come to it. That depends on the type of work that you're doing. So we'll come to that. Don't worry. But level 4 doesn't necessarily mean an SAQD. You can be level 4 and be doing an SAQA also, or an AIP or whatever be the case. BIP, or you can do a C or a D. It depends on what you are and what you're doing. Now there are only two levels of PCI compliance with for service providers. So a level 1, more than 300,000 card transactions annually. And for a level 2, it is less than 300,000 credit card transactions annually. So again, for a level 1, you are supposed to be doing ROC, AOC properly, and you also get the provision to appear in the Visa's global registry of approved service providers. Now, this is something else. Now, let's assume we are no, it's not a question of let's assume we are a QSA company and we are working across companies across the world. Now, we require to have, we do, this, many of our clients are service providers. So we do the level 1 for many companies. Now, it is not the lookout of the QSA, please remember that, to get you onto this Visa's global registry of approved service providers. We give the ROC and AOC to the service provider, to the client, and the client can then approach Visa and then discuss out the uh, details of how to get onto this global registry, and there could be some fees to be paid. So this is all between the client or the service provider and Visa. So there is a ROC, AOC, there's an ASV assessment to be done. But if you're less than 300,000 card transactions, then you can simply do an SAQ and again the ASV scans. Now, understand one thing, that when again for here also you might say I'm less than 300,000 card transactions, but again it's not really your choice. Just to prevent you from getting into trouble, I would suggest you to check with your acquirer. This happened with one of our clients in South America, wherein we did the we told them to speak to the uh, we told the client to speak uh, to their acquirer and to their client, and understand whether they come under a SAQA, under the sorry, whether they come under a SAQ or whether they come under a ROC. They said, okay, we need to get this done in the best way possible.
And they went ahead with the with doing just the SAQD. After they did this, they paid us everything. Then their client said, no, we want you to do the full ROC. So they had to hire our services again and get the assessment started again. Now, it meant that they had to pay us twice. Now that's good for us, but I'm not very happy about that because it meant that the client lost time and money. So we always advise all our clients to please check with your acquirer, to check with your clients whether they want you to do a full SAQ or a level one. If you can spare the time and money, and if you're looking at very solid positioning, if you're a service provider, I would suggest you to go ahead for a level one only, because it's very well possible that as on date, your clients are not asking you for a level one, they are okay with a level two. But tomorrow, it's very well possible that you are bidding for an RFP or for a contract, and a client will say, we need you to do a level one. Then what will you do? Right? So these things are there. So as the name suggests, then we come to the something called as an SAQ, Service Self-Assessment Questionnaire. As the word suggests, it is meant to be done by the clients directly. A full-fledged PCI DSS ROC has to be done by a QSA, by a certified QSA company and a certified QSA person. But a self-assessment questionnaire has to be done, can be done rather, by the end client in itself, by the auditee. So it's just a series of yes or no, and it is meant for small merchants and service providers. And over here, understand, for still many companies, even for an SAQ, they approach a QSA company so that this acceptability of the SAQ becomes higher. Okay, otherwise we have seen instances where clients do not agree to accepting the SAQ which has been done directly by the client. So they ask for a formal SAQ, SAQ signed by the QSA. Now there are 9 different SAQs, which is a subset of the overall PCI DSS standard based on the risk perception. So each merchant environment has a different set of FAQ that they are supposed to be complying to, and if they are accepting card payments. So again, this questionnaire, which questionnaire to be used, is a subset of the entire PCI DSS control set. It is not anything new. So SAQ has 2 components corresponding to service providers and merchant, a set of components that is, questions concerning the compliance for the service providers and merchants, and then finally an AOC. So there is something called as an ROC also, registration of compliance. So that is only if you're doing a level one. If you're a level two, three, four, whatever, whether you're a service provider or a merchant, or in short, if you're going for an SAQ, there is no ROC involved. ROC again is only if you are going in for a level one assessment. And these are the types, 9 types, right? So these are the first 5. There is an A, So this is only for third-party e-commerce websites, completely outsourced car acceptance and processing, and the website provides an iframe or URL that goes that redirects the customers to a third-party payment processing. So it's the least that they are just a third-party e-commerce, and there is absolutely no card data involved coming in directly to the merchant. And this is not applicable for face-to-face channels. It's only for CNP, that is card not present. AEP is for e-commerce websites, but here the merchant websites accepts payments. In the earlier A, there is no the merchant website doesn't accept payments and forwards the link directly to the third-party payment processor. Here also there is no electronic storage, processing, or transmission of any cardholder data on the merchant system or premises. Again, this is for e-commerce channels only and not a face-to-face or a card present channel. So here, in essence, there is a merchant website accepts the payment and then forwards it to the end user, to the end acquirer. There is a B. Here, this is the only the B SAQ is only applicable to face-to-face channels. It's not applicable for card not present channels. And of course, B is where the cards are processed via analog phone, fax, a standalone terminal, cellular phone, or imprint machines. And BIP is where the card processing happens via internet-based standalone terminals isolated from other devices on the network. So directly, they are using a PTS approved payment terminal with an IP connection. Directly you swipe it, it goes via the IP channel directly to the payment gateway, and then the processing happens without the data entering the client premises. Now, I'll give a nice example. There is this very big merchant, very big, and if I take the name, almost every one of you would have heard and positively also visited them. So they are just having a swipe system where they bought this, POS machines, and they have a PTS approved process in the background, and directly goes to the, client machine, to the client gateway. No, they don't have access to the encryption keys, nothing. But still, the bank insisted them to do a full-fledged level one PCI DSS. The reason being, they said too many card details, but they kept on insisting when I was there. That is why, because they no card data enters my premises. But the acquirer simply refused to accept any sort of excuse on that, and went ahead insisting them to do it. And there's a CVT which processes cards, again not applicable to e-commerce channels. Single transactions at a time via keyboard or an internet-based virtual terminal. One at a time via keyboard to virtual terminal or an isolated network at a time. Not on swipe devices. C is again not applicable to e-commerce channels. That's CVT and that's C. Again, not applicable to e-commerce channels connected to the internet, virtual VT, eligible IP terminal, uh, and no electronic card holder data storage is there. So again, if there is a IP involved, then in that case, there's a CSAQ. Now P2PEHW. So if this is if any merchant is using a PCI Council listed P2P solution with no electronic cardholder data storage, then P2PE is the SAQ to use. Now SAQ for merchants, SAQ-D for merchants, and SAQ-D for service providers. So if you're a merchant and your business is not covered in any of the top descriptions, then you fall under SAQ-D by default. SAQ, if you're a service provider and you're asked to do SAQ, then the only SAQ that is available for you is SAQ-D. That's how it is. So I hope I've answered that gentleman's query where he asked whether level 4 means SAQ-D. That's not the case. Level 4 would need an SAQ, but not necessarily SAQ-D. I really hope that is making sense. Okay, then there is a report on compliance documentation. So this is again, ROC is only and only and only if you are falling under the level 1 scope, which is more than 6 million transactions or 6 million Visa and or MasterCard transactions in a year. It's a very detailed, like I can call as an audit report, running into minimum 5 to 700 pages, and sometimes you've even written 1,000-page report, ROC, depending on the size of the organization. So there it is, it requires an on-site audit and require review or control, after which it is documented in the final draft of ROC. The form is then submitted to the merchant's acquiring bank for acceptance. And if it is required, then the merchant acquiring bank accept the ROC and then may send it to Visa, MasterCard for compliance verification. So, but that's not really the case with the service provider. The service provider can apply for Visa attestation directly after the ROC has been made. Then there is an AOC. AOC is now ROC is a very confidential document because it contains extremely sensitive information about the client, the auditee environment. It could be what data is stored where, how it is stored, encryption, what is the different hardware, software in use, the IP addresses. A lot of information is there in an ROC, extremely confidential. But for ROC, for an AOC just like a summarization of the ROC that can be circulated, if I can say it in a very with some discretion. But ROC, we definitely say that's not like a public document. You should not be circulating that. And so AOC is like the documented evidence that you can show to your clients and stakeholders their adoption of best services, best practices for securing cardholder data. And an AOC, as I said earlier, is also issued for an SAQ, but an ROC is not issued for a SAQ. So it basically means that the merchant or service provider has completed the applicable SAQ and has been verified by the QSA. So coming to the takeaway of this webinar, achieving and maintaining PCI compliance is the best way to protect businesses against cyber attacks. It is, I believe, one of the finest written standards in the world, and it is evolving extremely rapidly. And version 4.0 is really will be a milestone in the way how card data security is maintained. So for achieving that, first the merchants or service providers must determine their compliance level, and for that there are two ways. One is the number of transactions, but we always say forget the number of transactions, ask your acquirer and or payment brand. And if you're really looking at marketing out your services, then you should go in for a level 1, of course, but it is very painful and expensive. So you might need to take a call on that. You might want to do SQ first time, and maybe next year go in for a full-fledged ROC as your compliance posture, security posture improves. So once they are determined, they can strategize their action to validate compliance with the 12 requirements, as you saw earlier, 12 control objectives. And then while the lower level of compliance requirements may seem simpler, but understand merchants will still find it very difficult to meet the requirements if they do not have the internal IT infrastructure. PCI DSS, there are two parts to it, and there are pretty steep requirements also in the full-fledged ROC. It could be doing a cardholder data scan on a quarterly basis, having a proper FIM, which is reviewed on a weekly basis, and the alert management, everything. It is very difficult to manage. So unless you have a very good team and or IT infrastructure, do not go into it. You can always drop us a line and we'll guide you as much as possible. Don't worry. We are there with you to make the compliance journey easier and affordable. So that brings me to the end. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable time in this webinar. And as we close, Please to share your very valuable feedback, and your opinion really matters to us. And there are quite a few other questions also, and I will be, you know, you will be, answering it, and I will be answering that. And do drop me a line in case I missed any questions. That's a YouTube page. Now we are close to 1,000 subscribers. That's our official Facebook page, and we keep on posting a lot of articles and links. Do stay connected with us with our official LinkedIn page also, and that's our contact information. And do drop us a line in case you think that there is something that we can be of service to you, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you again for gracing us with your time. One sec, there is as I close, there is another question. Okay, so question is simple. For PCI SAQD, what real SAQ will have in case client or consultant fills SAQ answers and performs ASP scan? How will client prove that he is SAQD compliant? Well, as the word suggests, SAQ simply means that self-assessment questionnaire. They can be done by the client, but still many companies reach out to us for the simple reason being, what you asked right now, for the simple reason of what you just asked right now. That is, how do we know that the client has not misrepresented and said yes, 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 even though they are no, no, no. So that is where companies hire QSC companies like us to still do the assessment, even though that is not really required. Because as I said earlier, even if you are certified, you do that with all diligence, people will still be asking you questions as to why, how come, how do we know that you have actually filled this properly, and the and the evidence is in place. So all those things happen. So to avoid that and to give the clients a pleasant experience, merchants and service providers do not go for their own their own people doing the SAQ sign off. They basically get a QSA company to do this, because that's how it is supposed to be. They can show some level of independence. Okay, and there is, if you refer to the AOC, for example, in part 3C of the AOC, there is something called as a QSA attestation acknowledgement if applicable. I'll just show the screen to you. One sec, give me a moment. Yeah, I hope you can see this. And it says in part 3C, if a QSA was involved or assisted with this assessment, describe the role performed. So, see, that is where it is. So, in that case, we come aboard and we fill this up, and the QSA signs off. But it is not mandatory, because if you read the words over here, it says QSA acknowledgement if applicable. So, it is not, definitely not fully applicable. Sometimes it might be because the acquirer might have asked you to it, or your brand or your management might have asked you to do it likewise. All right, so that brings me to an end. So thank you again, team, for your time. I really appreciate you putting up your time for this, and do fill up that exit survey so we know that how things are moving, and whether you are uh, whether this webinar is actually fulfilling its objectives. Do drop in more subjects where we can do webinars in the future too. Thank you again. Stay safe, my dear friends, and I'll see you soon next